Why should you trust the surgeon that's doing your herniated disc repair? Because they got your back. Hey, what's going on, guys? My name is Abnav. I'm a first year med student in the MD PhD program, and today I want to talk a little bit about the worst part about medical school. Before I get into it, please hit the like and subscribe, it helps me out a lot. And let's get right into it. So, the worst part about medical school is probably going to be just the amount of information that's being thrown at you and the amount that you're expected to memorize. And I want to share a little bit about how I memorize things in med school and also how I study and things like that. If you haven't seen, I've already posted a video about how I study in med school. Please do check it out. It's a pretty cool video where I dive deep into how I organize folders and things like that. And with that being said, I don't do things that typical med students do. A lot of med students have a lot of different resources and they use a lot of different studying strategies. And I basically inherited whatever studying strategies I've done in undergrad into medical school. And so far, it's been working out. Like, I've been doing pretty well in the exams. This past exam with the neuro block, it's one of the most difficult blocks, and I think I did pretty well on that exam. With that being said, like, it's not that easy. Like, I'm like boasting about myself or whatever, but like the amount of information that med school like throws at you, and the analogy is always there. You're basically standing in front of a fire hydrant and it's going full blast, and you have to like drink that water. You need to absorb all that information in such a short amount of time. And that's like the worst part about medical school is the timing. And med school, like every place is different. Everyone has like a different curriculum. But it's typically the first 2 years of med school are didactic years. Basically, you're in lectures all the time and you're basically getting thrown information at you. And you need to study that information and you have to do exams. Some schools have exams like once a week for a semester. Other schools have exams like every few weeks, like what I have. And it's like a lot that you need to know in a short amount of time. And that's like the worst part. You're basically expected to pass exams, and that's like what defines you as a doctor at the end of the day if you're able to pass exams. And that includes third and fourth year as well. Now, it's not the same because third and fourth year are more clinically orientated, and you have basically physical skills that you need to master, whether that be social skills or actually procedural skills. Those skills need to be mastered, and you basically get an evaluation from preceptors, and that's actually a bigger portion of your grade, at least in my school, than the didactic years. But at the end of the day, there's still exams that happen at the end of these blocks. Every rotation that you do, there's a shelf exam, and then you got to do your USMLE exam, and it's all like basically thrown at you real quickly. You're expected to constantly study, and I think I get that. In med school, it's like a really fast-paced thing because 4 years, while it's not a lot, like you need to be able to get everything down in those 4 years because you don't want to keep paying for med school. You want to actually have a career. After more than 16 years in school, you have another 4 years in med school and then maybe another 4 years in residency. It's a lot. Plus, on top of that, I'm doing an MD PhD, which adds another 3 years. So it's like a lot fit into a small amount of time. And the reason that like it's so difficult is that medicine is constantly evolving. And that's a good thing. Science, like as long as things are evolving, both figuratively and literally, I guess, there's more information to learn. Just recently, we learned about the beta receptors, alpha receptors, cholinergic, muscarinic, all those things. And the professors are saying, like, back in my day, like, there was only one alpha receptor, one beta receptor. And now we have alpha 1, alpha 2, beta, and then there's subtypes within them. There's alpha 1A, 1B, 1D, and then beta receptors, and then 2A, B, C. Like, there's a lot, and the information keeps on pouring. And that just makes it so that we need to know more. And that's a good thing because that means we can, like, be better clinicians, right? We can like target specific things. We can know how things are progressing, how diseases come about. But it puts a lot of pressure on students. So I wonder how it's going to be in the future, where how medicine is going to evolve, and how like things are going to be. Where are we expected to know everything the way that the U.S. medical system is? Now, I can tell from experience. Like I have family in India that go through a different sort of medical journey. They actually specialize very early, like basically at the beginning of med school. And they don't really have med school per se, but the med school that equivalent that they have is like they start specialties really early. And I think that like that's like a really interesting idea because I mean it's an idea that like might have its pros and cons, but it's an interesting idea because that like you basically are going to be specialized from the beginning in a very specific field and you'll know a lot more detail about that field. The way that's done over here in the US is that you basically know everything in med school and then you pick and choose what specialty you want. And that's a great thing too because it gives you an idea of like what kind of specialties are out there. You get an inclination of everything, and it's very important because the human body, the biology that goes on it, the physiology, everything is connected in some way. And the way that it's connected is going to be very important in terms of diagnosis. The way that you refer people to other people that are specialists in that area. If you want to be like a primary healthcare physician, it's very important to know like what everything is happening in the body. Now you don't need to know like full details because that's where specialists do come into play. But as like an emergency physician or like a primary healthcare or even in like an urgent care or whatever, I think it's very important to know all these like things that go on. And I think that way it's better in the medical system, the education that's going on. But it's like also just a lot because as like the years go on, there's more and more research that's coming out. There's just more information that needs to be done, and I think that's just like gonna happen. Like that's a good thing because that means like science is progressing, but also a bad thing because as like being selfish student, like we just need to know more. And it's not. I mean, obviously, it wasn't like this decades ago, hundreds of years ago. It was much more simpler. In our eyes at least. Like back then, it was very complicated still, and now it's still very complicated. But it will be more complicated in the future. So, and people over in the future might be thinking like, "Oh my God, how am I doing this?" And I could have just went back to 2022 and be a med school student there and like ace everything. So it's like an interesting topic, and I think that's just like how things progress. It's the same way that IQ scores are scored these days too. Like the same test that was done in like 1950, if it was done today, most people would get above 100, and that basically means that that IQ test is invalid. That's why they keep updating the IQ test, and the difficulty of the IQ test is actually increasing every like decade or whatever, so that the average is still 100. And that's like basically how education is going. We're basically taught how to learn, like how to process information, but also, unfortunately, also how to pass tests. And like that's just like a thing about the education system as a whole. So that's basically it. That's like the worst part of med school is just the amount of information. I love the aspect of patient interaction. I love the aspect of integrating what we learn in the classroom to actual clinical cases. And I think that's like the most exciting part about med school. But it's just gonna like, it just is what it is. And it's unfortunate that that's like the case that it is. But at the end of the day, like I would still do this because it's still exciting. I love learning about the biology. I love learning about how things work together. And I think that the human body is very complex, but so beautifully put together. And that's like everything in science. Like I love how the connectiveness of it, everything is. And even the things that we learn in physics, everything in chemistry, it all comes together in biology. So yeah, that's about it. So that was kind of like a rant about like, I'm so tired and like this is so much information. But that's like that's just like what medicine is these days. And I would still be doing it no matter what. So yeah. With that being said, that's about it. So I hope you enjoyed the video. It's a little bit of a rant, but other than that, I hope you have a good one. Have a nice day.